Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel and to another stock market update. Haven't done one in several days, but I talked about it in my last video. I was expecting the Qs to find some resistance up here right around the 200. They didn't quite make it, but some of the other averages did make it, and they started to find some weakness, and the Qs just happened to not make it to the 200 period simple moving average, but I definitely thought that the market was going to start getting weak real soon, and that's what we got. After we got these two double dojis right here, I talked about on my Patreon how I thought it was going to move lower, and I actually tried to buy some calls on the SQQQ, but unfortunately I didn't get filled. I guess I should have paid up because there was only 1 day left for those options, and I thought it could be an explosive move either way once we got a break from these two consecutive dojis. Once you get 2 days of indecision, and that's what a doji represents, and once you get a break out of that range, it can usually be pretty decent. Now, since there was only 1 day left on those options, this little candle right here, it might not look like all that big of a move, but actually I would have made several 100% if I could have got filled on those SQQQ calls and sold them the next day. Who knows where I would have sold them the next day if I got filled, but the potential was there. If I could have sold them at the maximum profit point, it was definitely worth a few 100%. But anyway, just looking at the overall market right here, I do think that we're definitely going to see some more weakness. One thing that I do want to point out on the daily chart that I was also talking about with my Patreons is you can see the MACD indicator has, let me see if I can get this to work, has now crossed below the fast line. The fast line has crossed below the slow line, so momentum is definitely down in the short term. And you can see usually when this happens, usually gets some continuation to the downside. So I would expect some continuation to the downside, but not a ton of it. I'm still in the camp that we're probably going to rally the rest of the year. And another thing I also talked about in the Patreon group this week was that the stochastic was making a little bit of a rising wedge, and normally you get a breakdown, you get a break to the downside out of that, and that's exactly what happens. This was another reason why I was thinking the market was also going to break to the downside once we made that double doji. But hey, didn't end up getting filled on that trade, but I do think we are going to get some more downside in the market. Let me actually go to the 15-minute chart, and I'll show you what I am looking at. Let me get these lines out of here real quick. Looking at the 15-minute chart, the strongest area of support that I am seeing on the QQQs or the NASDAQ is this area right here. I try to look for the place with the most touches. That's usually the place where you're going to find the most support or resistance, and I try to look for something else. And as we can see, we had this nice gap up here on the 10th, so these gaps tend to get filled. So that's why I'm thinking this area right around here is probably going to be the next area of support. If we end up hitting that area on Monday, I'll probably end up taking a day trade because I don't know if it's going to hold up, be a complete trend reversal, but I wouldn't be surprised if, it's at least a multi-hour reversal where I could make some decent money on a day trade. So the 317, 318 area is probably where I'm looking for that bounce. So what I'm going to be doing is watching this thing on the intraday level, and once it breaks above probably the 8-period exponential moving average on the 15 or the hourly chart, depending on how it's shaping up, I'll probably end up taking a option trade to the long side. But let's go back to the daily chart. Let's get the stochastic out of here and take a look at some of the other indicators. If we look at the spider or the S&P 500, you can see the S&P 500 made it pretty much right to the 200 period simple moving average before it rolled over. So the fact that the S&P 500 made it to the 200 just made me a little weary that the NASDAQ or the QQQ was not going to make it to the 200. And if we look at the diamonds or the Dow Jones Industrial Average actually blasted through it by a little bit. And usually when you get blast through those major moving averages by just a smidge and then they send it right back down, that's usually a pretty decent reversal signal. So the fact that the Dow got weak like it did also made me very cautious on the market. And looking at the IWM or the Russell, you can see Russell, same thing, a little bit of a break above the 200 period simple moving average, and then a reversal right back down below it. Let's take a look at the USO. Taking a look at the oil contract, you can see it finally made it down to that 200 period simple moving average, and it just doesn't seem to be breaking down. The more I look at the way oil is shaping up, it's making me think that we're probably getting a little bit closer to a rounded bottom, and we could be heading towards that next leg up in oil. I know that's not good news for any of the consumers out there or the economy, but the more oil kind of stays above that 200 period simple moving average, the more it's being accumulated, and the better odds that this thing is just going to turn out to be a rounded bottom. So obviously this is good news if you're holding a lot of oil stocks, but I don't know, not so much great news for the consumer. And let's actually jump back to the Qs for one more minute before I get into some individual stocks. I came across some information about the presidential cycle. If you're not familiar with the presidential cycle, it's just a 4-year cycle in the market. It tends to be rather accurate, and I haven't looked at that cycle in a little while, but I saw a statistic on the presidential cycle, and they say that the fourth quarter of the second year, which is coming up, that starts in November and going all the way to the second quarter of the next year. So this November to June of next year tends to be the strongest 2 quarters in that presidential cycle. And in fact, going back 80 years or 20 cycles, there's never been a negative period in the market. So if I'll just bring the Qs out a little bit here, and I guess that's starting right here in November. And if we take this thing all the way till June, this is the period in the market that is usually the best 2-quarter period in the 4 years of the presidential cycle. There's a lot of theories out there why that happens. But if I had to guess what is going to happen in the market, let me back it out just a little bit here. I'm thinking we're probably going to get some extended weakness in the market before we end up hitting this 200 period or the 50 period simple moving average. Probably grind around this area for a little bit, and then I think the market could potentially start rallying from there. So if we do get some extended weakness in the overall market, unless there is some real deterioration going on, I mean just heavy selling, I'm probably going to end up doing some more accumulation in some of my long-term holds because, odds favor going forward. This could end up being a very bullish period in the market. Now, when I was looking at those statistics, actually the worst quarter of the presidential cycle is the second quarter of year 2, which of course just ended on June 30th. And as you can see, this did end up being a pretty nasty quarter. So it played out this year as well. Year 2 of the second year of the presidential cycle ends up being pretty nasty, and that's exactly what we got. But let me get this crap out of here. Let's take a look at some individual charts here. Another stock that I took a position in was ETNB. And this one, I bought this one on the breakout here at $4.83. I just ended up buying stock, but I thought that the biotech stocks were looking rather strong, and I ended up taking a position in this one, but all the other names, or at least most of the other names I was looking at, ended up rolling over pretty hard with the market over, these last several days or so. So surprisingly, ETNB hasn't stopped me out just yet, but it looks like it's definitely consolidating, holding above that 8-period exponential moving average, had a nice little rounded bottom, and we're getting into the acceleration part of the trend, hopefully, and the fact that it held up quite nicely despite the weakness in the overall market makes me pretty optimistic. This one might end up being a pretty decent trade. Now, last week I talked about the Bitcoin miners, and man, they rolled over super hard. I didn't take a position in any of them. But these things had a pretty decent run up. This is actually one that I already owned stock in. I didn't buy any additional stock. I actually tried to sell covered calls on my positions on this day, but it gapped up to this level right here, and I thought it was going to keep running for at least a little bit, but it immediately reversed and rolled over. I wish I would have just taken what I could have gotten on those covered calls because premiums were way inflated on this day right here, but Oh well, it didn't end up making that trade, but we'll just keep watching it. Hopefully I can sell some call options on that one. I plan on holding CleanSpark for quite a while. You know, and the fact that unprofitable tech rolled over last week, plus we had a little bit of a rollover in the price of Bitcoin, that just exacerbated the rollover in some of the Bitcoin stocks. I mean, if we look at Mara, we can see Mara had it once it had that nice breakout out of that little pennant formation. This thing rolled over hard as well, even though this one looks a little better than CleanSpark. Let me think of some other names. Like Hut Mining was on the list. Hut Mining had a big rollover as well. So when I see a chart like this and some of these unprofitable high growth names, you know, once they get some momentum going to the upside and then they just roll over really hard, that makes me think that the rally is probably going to have some further weakness going forward. I don't think this pullback that we're having in the market right now is going to be a shallow one. I do think it maybe could last multi-weeks before we end up getting a bottom, and then, you know, we end up having a little bit of a rise into that 2-quarter presidential cycle. You know, there's going to be plenty of people out there that know about that cycle. They're going to try to front run it and get in front of you know, the time when it starts moving up. So that's what I'm kind of expecting to happen. Some of the other growth names out there that rolled over pretty hard. Lemonade right here. Lemonade had a pretty decent run. Had a very, very sharp pullback, even though, and this is 5 down days in a row, with the 5th one being very sharp, you know, bigger than the other 4. Technically, usually when you see a pattern like that, you're pretty close to a short-term bottom. But when you see growth names like this that just roll over super hard, it just makes me think that there's going to be some more downside in the market. Another one was BYND. Oops, let me see here. How about BYND? There we go. Beyond Meat. See, Beyond Meat has had a pretty decent run, but rolled over rather hard. Another one, C3AI. You know, this one rolled over rather hard. Another one, Senseonics. I could probably keep going here. Fubo had a big run and then a huge reversal, and so did Bio Nano Genomics, BNGO. So, I mean, I could probably keep going forever. You guys probably know a bunch of growth names out there that had big rollovers after decent moves up. Usually when you get a run like this is a little bit of a climax run in the short term, and you end up getting further weakness going forward. So the fact that these things are not holding up very well just makes me think, you know, we could have some more weakness in the overall market. But looking at some charts that I think look pretty decent, and there isn't a whole heck of a lot of them. One is ATAI. This one is still consolidating up here. I've been waiting for a breakout above $5 a share. I think this one could have a very nice breakout. So this one is definitely on my watch list. Nice little creeping uptrend, and now it's forming a tight consolidation at the upper boundaries. Of course, I don't want to be in this one until it breaks $5, so it just stays on the watch list. Another one is IMVT. Look at IMVT. This one was also on my watch list, but I didn't buy any of this one. But this one made a nice little rounded bottom on the intraday chart, and then had an explosion right through the 200 period simple moving average. So if this one can remain above the 200 period simple moving average, I'm going to look to buy this one on pullbacks. Another one's looking pretty good is TERN. You can see this one had a sharp move up and is just starting to consolidate. So looking at this one on the 15-minute chart, we can see it has pulled back, but the range is starting to get pretty tight here. So we get a break above, I'm going to call it 475. I'm going to look to try to get long TERN. And last one is IMGN. Let me go back to the daily chart, take a look at it. Taking a look at this one, you can see nice little breakout of that tight consolidation near the upper boundaries, and it's making a nice little flag on the intraday chart. If we go back to the 15-minute chart, you can see this thing is coming back down to the 200 period simple moving average, and break above that trend line, or this area right here is about 585-ish. I'll probably look to get long IMGN. Very nice looking chart right there. But you know, I'm going to end the video right here. If you guys see any nice looking charts out there, make sure you let me know in the comment section. I appreciate it when you do that. But I'll end it right there. Thank you so much for watching this one all the way to the end. And until next time, take care, everybody.